What's going on, YouTube? This is Acadius, and welcome to another episode of What I Want to See in an MMO. And for those of you who are just now joining us, accidentally somehow tripping over my channel out of the blue, this is the fourth episode in an ongoing series where I talk about things that I would like to see in an MMO that I think would be freaking awesome. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So, the first thing I want to talk about here is massive dungeons with red zones. And you're probably thinking, oh, massive dungeons are going to take forever to clear. It's going to be a chore. It's like the same thing we had with World of Warcraft. I don't want that. And I can't blame you for thinking that because, you're probably thinking in terms of everything that you've experienced so far. What I'm saying here is if you have rest zones that you can easily go back and forth between to pick up where you left off. Things aren't, raid locked like they were in World of Warcraft, where, oh man, you got 1 week to clear it and then you're done. You don't have to do it that way. There's other ways to do dungeons. In Ultima Online, we didn't even have instance dungeons. We just walked into the dungeon and you could pretty much run to the end. I'm not saying I want people to be able to run to the end, but making things a little more accessible would be way better, and then even having, just like in, again, in anime, just like in Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? That was great. They had rest zones. They actually had cities on certain floors, like right after a raid boss you would have a floor that was peaceful. You had a city. You had vendors. Players would meet up there, camp out there, rest there, repair their weapons there, and then move on further deeper into the dungeon. I think this is a great idea, and it would be an easy way for developers to add new content to the game because they just keep expanding the dungeon, making it go deeper and deeper and deeper. And every time they just add a few more floors to the dungeon as well as other things to the world as well to expand the world. But every time they're adding new major content, they're also expanding that dungeon and making it deeper and adding more and more challenges for the player. I think this would be an easy way for developers to add replay content or replay value to the game and also give the players something to strive for. And speaking of Ultima Online and the non instance dungeons, I would like to see non instance dungeons. And historically, we've seen either the entire game is non instance dungeons or instance dungeons, but I would like to see a mix of that. You don't have to do one or the other. I don't understand why devs are just so locked in this box of, well, they're all instanced or they're all non-instanced. You can have a mix of both. It's fine. It's okay. The world will not end if you do this. You know, so they don't have to make them all instanced or instanced. Just make some of them instanced that are like the super high tier, mythic level dungeons, and then make some of them non-instanced. There's nothing wrong with that, and I would like to see a game that incorporated that into its dungeon system. And the next thing I would like to talk about is bosses that challenge all members of the raid equally. So everyone needs to bring the same degree of skill to the plate in order to succeed. World of Warcraft, we did not see that. Okay, mages are sitting there just spamming whatever button corresponds to fireball or frostbolt over and over and over, and that's all they're doing. They could have put a friggin' water bird on their keyboard, pecking the same key, and no one would have known the difference. Like the people that needed the most skills were what, the main tank, the healers, the druids, maybe some paladins when they have to hit DI. How hard can that get? But for the most part, DPS was just the most boring crap ever. And it's not like we haven't seen these kinds of bosses before. It's like Elden Ring with 3 or 4 players. Okay, well, the boss doesn't just sit there and target one person over and over and over. It changes its targets, and sometimes it can be a kind of deceptive who its last hit on its combo is going to land on. Sometimes, they'll switch targets and just smash you out of the blue when it was attacking someone else. And we see the same thing portrayed in anime as well. Log Horizon, Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? The raid bosses, especially in that last season of Girls in a Dungeon, that raid boss, the dragon that they fought, the double-headed dragon, they did a great job of showing that dragon changing targets, and you can do the same thing in games. Just because it happened in anime doesn't mean it's impossible to make that work in a real world video game. So I would really like to see bosses no longer just focusing one person the whole freaking time. This whole one main tank idea is the thinking of a dinosaur. It's on its way out, just like Blockbuster. So, we need to let it die and embrace the new, which is bosses don't just focus one person. They focuses the entire raid as a whole, and everybody's got to pull their own weight in order to defeat this boss. And next up is the ability to reset dungeons and raid timers at will. And that's assuming your game even has it. I'm not a proponent for that system. Straight out of World of Warcraft, well, you had a week to clear the raid, and then, well, it resets, and you're locked until that happens. You're locked to that raid with those people. You can't raid with other people if you wanted to in the meantime, and you can reset it whenever you want to. And then we're still having the same problems out of Blizzard with Diablo 4. I think they just recently fixed it. And do not understand the idea behind it. Other than just time gating. It's just time gating. Is what it is. It's really just time gating. So they time gate you for a week. Let's say your guild isn't strong enough to clear past, say, the third or fourth boss in that raid, and it's an 8-boss raid. Well, shit, you gotta freaking wait a week before you can do it again, so that you can get the same gear again. To gear up more people in your group, in your guild. That's just ridiculous. They need to do away with dungeons and raid timers altogether, in my opinion, or else allow you to reset it whenever you want to. So you can do those bosses again in the same week. So you can clear those same bosses twice in the same week. Now you can get the gear faster. If they have to, if a developer has to do some sort of arbitrary time gating in order to keep the players from getting too far too fast and they can't keep up, well, I think that they haven't put enough thought into their game and their systems so that they can actually give you some sort of busy work that actually doesn't feel like repetitive quests over and over. Like you're actually building towards something. It's meaningful what you're doing. They haven't really thought enough about what they're putting into the game and how easy that stuff is to complete. So they ought to freaking, put in other things like gathering materials to create a custom guild hall, or gathering materials to build your house or decorate your house, finding the things that you want to put into your house to decorate it. There's a million and one ways that they can do this, but they just don't want to do it, you know? And I don't understand it. Like some of these systems, like especially like the guild hall thing, if you were to have to gather the materials in order to build a single column in your guild hall, and then you have to do that for everything that's in the guild hall, the walls, the floors, the doors, the columns, the ceiling, everything that goes in there, then that takes time. And the more you break it apart, the more time it takes. And that's all cosmetic, so it doesn't actually affect the gameplay value of the game. It's just something to do in the meantime, you know? So I think if the devs were to do that, well, it'd solve a lot of their problems. And going straight off of raids, I want to see raids for lower levels. Actual raids that take more than 5 people. You have to have a group of, say, level 30-ish people in order to take this raid on. So you get the raid experience put into these newer players growing up, leveling up, so that it's not like, well, once I get to 60, then I can raid. Okay, that's ridiculous. Why? Like when everything is so high stakes at level 60, that's not when someone should be learning how to raid. They should already have these basic understandings ingrained in them way before they get to max level, whatever that level is, whether it's 60 or 100, doesn't matter. You know, all along the way, there should be raids, and they should be learning how to do these things. And I think it's a lot of pressure on, say, one person, like the raid leader. You get to level 60, you get this guild, and you've got all these people depending on you, and then, well, who's going to be the raid leader? Oh, this guy says he thinks he can do it. That's a lot of freaking pressure, man. You can build up to that slowly but surely, teaching these players through your game mechanics how to be a raid leader and what needs to happen in raids way before they get to max level. And I think that devs nowadays are just sleeping on that opportunity to teach their players how to play their game. And the way to do that is by introducing them to these concepts way sooner than max level. And then the next thing I want to mention, which again has to do with dungeons and raids, is traps and fake walls, ambushes, and hidden doors. Stuff like that is kind of a staple in a lot of games. Elden Ring, Dark Souls, they have all those things: hidden walls, fake doors, traps, ambushes. They've got everything that are notorious for it. It's kind of ridiculous, especially in Demon Souls. The ambushes behind the corners and stuff where they jump at you. Illusory walls. So I think that, like, why don't they use those in modern MMOs? Like these hidden little secrets in the dungeons that, well, you could easily miss just walking past them. And some of them could be puzzles that take a long time to figure out. And honestly, the thing that really comes to mind, which is hilarious, is the so-called cow level in Diablo 4 that definitely does not exist. But players just went out of their way to try to, fabricate this conspiracy theory of a cow level in D4 when there wasn't one. It was so ridiculous watching it unfold. But I think that, what if there was a cow level in D4 and then they uncovered it after all this work and research and, collaborating, and finally somebody uncovered it? That would be so cool. And we could see that in an MMO.
Hidden dungeon only I can enter! Let me trade its secret to be the world's strongest!
The anime that comes to mind is the hidden dungeon only I can enter. That was great. It's an awesome wall. Kind of reminded me of the entrance to Moria.
The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter.
And it's like this magical rune door, and then you had to say this certain line, which, in a video game that translates to typing something in chat in the / say, type something specific in the chat, and then the door would open and it would let you in, or your party in. They could do stuff like that, and then they could also do it, and I think this is important. They could do it in low level dungeons. So in a low level dungeon, like a level 15 or 20 dungeon, there's this hidden door, and then it leads to a high level portion of that dungeon that took a bunch of research in order to piece together, in order to figure out what to say in order to open that door, which you could only possibly figure out by the time you were max level or close to it. And I think that's an awesome idea. So I just don't know why people aren't doing that. It's like devs nowadays, modern devs, are just lacking imagination. And that's really what this whole series is about, like imagination. If we can imagine it nowadays, we can 99% of the time make it happen in a video game. So when we're playing a game, we're looking at the imagination of the developers. And I'm just saying, that the games I'm playing nowadays lack imagination. You know, they're not dreaming big enough, right? They need to capture our imaginations with their imaginations, and they're not doing it. And that's the problem that we're having with devs today. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, or maybe the video got you thinking about what you would like to see in an MMO. And if you have, feel free to share that in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with my latest content. Thanks, and I'll see you later.